I'm Nima Rajan. A new online survey by Leger and the Association for Canadian Studies finds more than 4 out of 5 respondents support closing the Canadian border to travelers coming from countries where the Omicron variant of COVID-19 is present. A majority of the more than 1,500 respondents say they are in favor of possibly closing Canada's border with the U.S. for a period of time. In response to the detection of Omicron, Canada quickly put in place travel measures. This includes banning visitors from some African countries to curb the spread. An upcoming trip by Indigenous leaders to meet with Pope Francis at the Vatican has officially been postponed. A joint statement from delegates sending organizations said it was due to the potential health risks surrounding international travel. The Indigenous leaders say the trip will be rescheduled for 2022. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is in favor of Canada following Washington's lead and staging a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics. The White House is making the move to send a strong message about China's record on human rights. Mr. Singh says there is a way to send a message while still letting Canadian athletes pursue their Olympic dreams. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole wants a committee of MPs to review Canada's response to the fall of Afghanistan and the subsequent humanitarian crisis. He says the committee will help Canadians understand why Canada failed to act. The government committed to bring 40,000 Afghans to Canada, but so far only about 4,000 have arrived. Immigration Minister Sean Fraser said a review should not be held while the government is still trying to get Afghans here. Well, there is a lot that scientists still don't know about the COVID-19 Omicron variant, but a new poll suggests Canadians believe it will be as bad, if not worse, than Delta. The online survey by Leger and the Association for Canadian Studies finds 44% of respondents think Omicron will have worse impacts on case counts than Delta. This while 43% think the impact will be the same. British Columbia is shifting to repair and recovery mode. This is following recent record rainfall that caused devastating floods and landslides and crippled transportation links. Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth says the amount of cleanup and repair work ahead in southern BC is massive. But after 3 weeks of efforts by volunteers, Canadian Forces soldiers, and emergency officials to secure dikes, rescue people and animals, and salvage properties, the rebuilding job must start. Saskatchewan's Minister of Rural Health says he will travel to Sucker River. This is following a request for help yesterday from a band counselor who says there is a suicide crisis in the community brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Everett Hindley didn't say when he'll go, but says rural communities are facing a shortage of mental health workers, which is a problem made worse by the pandemic. Healthcare workers in the north were redeployed during the fourth wave. While most have returned, services were short-staffed for months. After 2 weeks of downtime, the Canadian Armed Forces say its water purification system in Iqaluit is up and running again. The military has been in the Nunavut capital since October 23rd to purify river water using a reverse osmosis system. Iqaluit and its 8,000 residents have been under a state of emergency since October 12th, when fuel was detected in the city's drinking water. But the military's water purification unit hasn't been operating since November 22nd, when high winds knocked over a tent and left the system open to freezing. There are 928 new cases of COVID-19 and 9 virus-related deaths in Ontario today. Of the new cases, 450 are in people who aren't fully vaccinated against the virus, and 77 people have an unknown vaccination status. There are 165 people in ICUs with COVID-19 related illness, including 95 on ventilators. A Canadian drug maker is poised to bring positive clinical trial results from the first plant-based COVID-19 vaccine to Health Canada. Quebec-based Medicago is producing doses of its made-in-Canada vaccine in anticipation of its application to the federal drug regulator. It has already started building inventory and has promised 75 million doses to Canada. Trials showed that the drug is 75.3% effective against the Delta variant of COVID-19 and 88.6% effective against the Gamma variant. A line of thunderstorms knocked out electricity to thousands of residents in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick overnight. Some schools were closed in both provinces, and some ferry services were canceled. As well, wind warnings have been issued across Newfoundland, where gusts reaching between 90 and 120 kilometers per hour are in the forecast for later today. Stay tuned. We'll have our interview segment up next after the break. We'll be right back. The federal Liberals have introduced a bill in the House of Commons that would repeal mandatory minimum penalties for drug offenses and some gun-related crime. It would allow a judge to exercise discretion in imposing sentences that relate to the facts of the case. This is including consideration of the individual's experience with systemic racism and whether they pose a risk to public safety. The legislation would allow for greater use of conditional sentences, including house arrest, counseling, or treatment for those who do not threaten public safety. These reforms have long been called for by advocates who have argued that the current measures perpetuate systemic racism in Canada's justice system. Well, joining us today to discuss this proposed bill is Natasha Touesnard, Executive Director of the Canadian Association of People Who Use Drugs. Ma'am, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
So let's start with the current mandatory minimum penalties for drug offenses. What do they look like right now?
So they vary. For the minimum penalties, in certain circumstances, it depends on the quantity, the amount, I guess, of drugs and the circumstances around it. So if a substance is involved with, a scheduling of another common substance as well. And then the other thing would be whether or not the prosecution treats the offense as indictable, more serious, or if it prosecutes by way of summary offense, which is actually less serious. And if trafficking is involved, there's numerous reasons why. It's good for people who use drugs. I think it's egregious, my personal self, for to have to face maybe up to life in prison, even for having a Schedule I substance for the first time, and that would be the mandatory, or the mandatory highest, I guess they would put in. But the minimums have not done anything to reduce people from using drugs, and they have systemically over-incarcerated disproportionately Black people and Indigenous people in our country, and that to me is a disgrace. And so the further we can move drug policy forward so that it recognizes all people of color as the same and treats them, within a court of law the same, would be a great world. But in the best world, they wouldn't be criminalized for these at all. We would figure out a system that meets the world that we live in today. Because the fact is we're not going to have a drug-free world. We have drugs. It's just that people have used drugs since the beginning of time, and it's going to continue to.
All right, Ms. Touesnard, what is your organization, CAPIT, expecting from this bill in particular?
Well, we're hoping that they will drop them and let the judge have the discretionary, to look at the circumstances, because some of them are high even for a first-time offender, depending on what's involved, who's around you, if it's children are nearby. But I think this just goes back to bad drug policy to begin with. Like we really have no control over the illegal market, and so these things happen in secret, and we allow criminalized organizations to take over and actually sell drugs and to produce them and give them to people. And so I think that's more of the issue, is the law that's around it. I think we create regulated markets that could fit people, make sure youth don't use drugs, not advertise, and do it in a respectful way so that people that do use drugs have access to safe drugs that aren't going to kill them. So I guess this is a nice thing. Do I know how well it's going to work? No, we'll see when it happens. I think it's a good gesture on the Department of Justice to go forward with that. But we know there's a lot of cities coming forward with decriminalization, and is this the farthest that they actually want to go? Is the other question.
All right, ma'am, just about a minute left here, but let's dig into the bill in particular. What types of conditional sentences would this bill allow for, specifically for those who don't pose a threat to public safety?
Well, and to be honest with you, as I said earlier, I hadn't really read through the whole document, and so to be honest with you, I would be lying if I knew. but I would think that it would give them the discretion to be able to make a decision on one's race, ethnicity, circumstances, poverty, recognizing that, when we talk about this being a war on drugs, it's never has been. It's always been a war on people that use drugs. And so therefore, our jails, as I said earlier, are filled with Black and Indigenous people and predominantly poor people, with the fastest growing population of Black women being in prison. And so I would hope that these people, or not just these people, all people, that if mandatory minimum penalties were dropped, would make a difference in their life. But I mean, then it still leaves it up to one judge's discretion.
Mm-hmm. All right, Ms. Touesnard, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
All righty, thanks for having me.
Stay tuned. More news from around the world coming up after the break. We'll be right back. Canada's innovation minister says this country's biomanufacturing sector has rebounded beyond his expectations in recent months. The country's $173 million investment in a plant-based vaccine made by Quebec company Medicago is likely to come to fruition within weeks. This with the company announcing clinical results today showing 75% efficacy against the Delta variant of the virus. Several other drug companies have announced plans to produce their vaccine products in Canada. This while Merck plans to produce its COVID-19 antiviral treatment in Whitby, Ontario. Well, joining us now to discuss the report released today from BioTalent Canada, titled Close Up on the Bioeconomy, is Mr. Rob Henderson, President and CEO of BioTalent Canada. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks very much. Good to be here.
So firstly, can you describe what the bioeconomy is for our viewers?
Sure. The bioeconomy is essentially the biotechnology industry. So it's associated with the invention, the development and production of bio-based products, production processes, or intellectual property. It's divided into primarily 4 subsectors, and that's biohealth, or the life sciences, agribio, biofuels, or bioenergy rather, and bioindustrial, which is things like bioadhesives, wood pellets, etc.
Sounds like a wide scope of industries there, sir. So what is the status of the bioeconomy across Canada?
Well, the bioeconomy, to many people's surprise, the bioeconomy in Canada has about 12,000 companies, primarily small and medium-sized enterprises of less than 50 people. So it's not all the big pharmaceutical firms that people think about. And we have over 200,000 Canadians employed in those 12,000 companies.
All right, sir. Well, going to your report here, it really highlighted some of the gaps that were exposed by the pandemic. So would you be able to touch on that?
Yeah, in terms of the study covered everything from just prior to the pandemic and during the pandemic. And it's exposed that we are going to be requiring 65,000 additional workers by the year 2029. And so this is going to be a really big issue in terms of this. Now, the fact that the bioeconomy is booming is good news to all of us, as well as the fact that we even have our own domestic vaccine production, as your report indicated. But at the same time, to ensure that it keeps firing on all economic thrusters, we're going to have to get a lot better at recruiting and retaining the best and the brightest to fill some of those 65,000 jobs.
And taking all of this into consideration, as these companies we mentioned are looking to produce vaccines in Canada, what is your outlook for Canadian bioeconomy in both the short and long term?
Well, we've been able to sort of set 2 talent benchmarks, both in 2024 and 2029. We're confident in the bioeconomies and the industry's willingness to adapt, but we're going to have to get a lot better at HR, because right now, not only are those 65,000 jobs the way the industry is now, but if we're going to be trying to get vaccine manufacturing to return to Canada, there's going to be even more of the talent that's going to be required. So a lot of the people that are running some of those 12,000 small and medium-sized enterprises, as I mentioned, are going to have to get a lot better in human resources, which a lot of them have never even studied, let alone have any expertise in.
And it's interesting that your report looks at specific provinces as well. So how have the bioeconomy labor markets been reacting in the main regions within Canada?
The main regions, what's surprising in our study is the main regions pretty much are monochromatic. They've been affected almost the exact same way, especially in the 3 major clusters, and that's in Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. They're coming up with the same kind of skills gaps that are going. And a lot of the skills gaps we're finding are in biomanufacturing. Across again, there's going to be 16,000 jobs that we're going to be requiring in those sectors. But also some of those industry agnostic jobs like sales, marketing, HR, accounting, all of these companies, are businesses. they generate revenue and expenditures like any other business. So a lot of those skills are going to be lacking in these companies as well. In terms of the regions, a lot of them have been, in fact, all of them have been affected pretty much equally. The one that's of note would be the Atlantic Canada. They have a double problem because not only do they have, are they growing, which is wonderful news for all the companies out there, but they have a disproportionate amount of students from the Maritimes that leave for other areas to pursue their career. And that doubly affects them in a negative way.
All right, sir, just about 40 seconds left here, but really quickly, what strategies does this report call for in order to fill these current shortages?
Well, we need to create jobs and create work-integrated learning opportunities. The best way to upskill people very fast are in these internship and co-op positions. Second of all, we really have to get better at exploring underrepresented groups, such as immigrants, Canadians with disabilities, and Indigenous Canadians. They are dismally represented within the bioeconomy, and these are readily accessible labor markets.
All right, Mr. Henderson, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thanks very much.
We'll be back with news from around the world as China accuses the U.S. of violating the Olympic spirit. Omicron cases are reported in 9 African countries, and a British whistleblower says the U.K. abandoned Afghan allies to the Taliban. These stories and more when we come back from break, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. China accused the U.S. today of violating the Olympic spirit, and it vowed the U.S. will pay a price for announcing an American diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Games in February. The comments come from China's foreign minister, and they come amid an increasingly bitter feud. This is over the Biden administration's decision not to send officials over human rights concerns. Spokesperson Zhao Lijian says the boycott runs counter to the Olympic motto, "More United." Omicron cases have been confirmed in at least 9 African countries, with some officials reporting that initial cases appear to be mild. Countries reporting Omicron include Botswana, Ghana, Mozambique, Namibia, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. South Africa remains the epicenter of the Omicron outbreak, with experts saying that the overwhelming majority of its thousands of new cases per day are of the new variant. In East Africa, Uganda reported its first 7 cases of Omicron on Tuesday. Uganda's Minister of Health, Jane Ruth Acheng, said all of the 7 travelers have mild symptoms. A whistleblower is alleging to a British parliamentary committee that the Foreign Office abandoned many British allies in Afghanistan and left them to the mercy of the Taliban. Raphael Marshall claims the evacuation effort was dysfunctional. He told MPs that thousands of pleas for help via email weren't read between August 21st and 25th. He also claims that British officials spent time and energy arranging the evacuation of almost 200 dogs and cats from a Kabul animal shelter, which is run by a former Royal Marine, Pen Farthing. He claims Foreign Office staff received an instruction from Prime Minister Boris Johnson, which is something that Mr. Johnson's spokesman says is entirely untrue. Ukrainian authorities charged on Tuesday that Russia is sending tanks and snipers to the line of contact in war-torn eastern Ukraine to provoke return fire. This is an accusation that comes amid fears that a Russian troop buildup near the Ukrainian border might indicate plans for an invasion. U.S. President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin held a video call this morning that lasted just over 2 hours. The White House says that Mr. Biden raised concern about the escalation of military forces near Ukraine, along with discussing ransomware attacks with Iran. Japan's military has continued with troop and tank drills on its northern island of Hokkaido. This comes as Tokyo looks to confront rising threats in the region, including from Russia and China. The Northern Army headquarters said that the drills will continue until December 14th and involve about 1,300 troops. China's increased naval activity is among Japan's biggest worries. It has prompted Tokyo to rapidly step up troop deployment and missile defenses across southern Japan, including on remote islands. Lawyers representing Rohingya refugees have filed a more than $150 billion class action lawsuit against Facebook parent company Meta Platforms in California. The suit claims the company failed to stop hateful posts that incited violence against the Muslim ethnic group by Myanmar's military rulers and their supporters. Lawyers in the United Kingdom have issued notice of their intention to file a similar legal action. The European Medicines Agency said in a statement on Tuesday that using different types of vaccines together, known as heterologous vaccination, can provide protection against COVID-19. The EMA, along with the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, said that a mix and match strategy could give nations more options in vaccination campaigns. This comes as Europe faces rising infection and hospital rates amid concerns of the new Omicron variant. The United Arab Emirates says it is changing its official work week to Monday through Friday. The UAE's state-run news agency announced today that starting next month, government employees will work a half day on Friday, which is the traditional Islamic holy day, and workers can then take Saturday and Sunday off. It marks a major change, allowing the UAE's financial district to work Western hours. The official work week in much of the Middle East has long been Sunday through Thursday. Well, this is the 80th anniversary of a day that U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt said would live in infamy. Ceremonies are being held in Washington and Hawaii today to remember the 2,403 U.S. service members and civilians who died in the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The Mississippi Aquarium is nursing 40 endangered Kemp's Ridley sea turtles back to health. The waters off the coast of Massachusetts cooled down so quickly that the turtles became lethargic and couldn't swim away. The world's smallest sea turtles were flown to Mississippi by a volunteer pilot group called Turtles Fly 2. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time.